We've talked to a range of inspiring leaders during this course and from different age groups. Hopefully you will have found their perspective on becoming climate leaders interesting and helpful to guide you on your way. The key message is yes, do it. Prepare, but do it. In the broader sense of the word, leadership is synonymous with taking action, whether that be big or small. The demonstration value that that action brings is a proof of leadership. There are quite a number of other points that jump out from these interviews, so let's run through some of these as we close out on this module. Firstly, as Chido Mpemba says, start from where you are. What makes you want to be a climate leader is ultimately something that comes from within yourself and your lived experience. Recognize this first and foremost, and don't underestimate yourself. Anyone can be a leader, although not everyone actually becomes one. It's very much a choice. Building on this idea, Sophie Dowd talked about how leadership can come in many shapes and sizes, and that it makes sense to lead from a position of doing what you do best. For example, if you're good at writing, lead from a perspective of journalism or other forms of writing. Now, these are some of the more inspirational ideas evoked by our speakers, which encourage us all to become climate leaders in various and multiple ways. A climate universe of leaders, perhaps, or an ecosystem of leadership. Then, of course, there is more specific advice offered. Sophie also talks about the three factors, including purpose, power, and people. Leadership in her mind is not about individual action, but about uniting people towards a common goal. So act together, that's the people element. Through a sense of unity, that's the power element, towards a common goal, and that's the purpose. The more clear you can be about your purpose, the more likely you will be able to bring people together. Linked to this, as Nikhil says, are concepts of personal integrity and empathy. These are important cross-cutting traits that people tend to recognize in you, which make them gravitate towards you, either consciously or not. It's worth thinking about these personal traits in the way that you go about your work rather than more directly about being a leader. The one leads to the other. As I often say to my children, the surest way to power and influence is to make people around you feel good about themselves. Add a little time and consistency, and there you have your result. David Dower, in his analogy of the ship skipper, puts it more simply. Treat people well, particularly when challenges occur. This is why leadership can be tough in practice, because you need to be at your best when the headwinds are blowing towards you. But then he also says that what gets you through such times are the people around you, your team. Treat them well, and they will always support you. Then Chido talked about the type of leadership that occurs through the example that you set to others, particularly when this involves personal courage or resilience in the face of adversity. In essence, we can become leaders for just a moment, but that moment may echo for many years or even generations to come. She gives the example of Nasreen, a refugee from conflict in her native Sudan, who continued to raise her voice on climate in spite of the many other pressures and dangers that she was facing at the time. So personal courage is a factor in leadership. Be knowledgeable about the issues, advises Hassan and also Nikhil. In other words, lead from a position of real understanding. It doesn't mean that you have to be the expert on the topic, but as expert as can reasonably be expected. People will respect this alongside some of the other elements that we've discussed. Keep in mind that leaders should be flexible. The 6 styles described by Daniel Goleman can serve as a useful framework for thinking about different approaches to leadership. However, it's important to remember that these styles may be appropriate in some situations and not others. So, you will need to adapt according to the specific challenges at hand. As with most things in life, no one size fits all. In the end, you will have to find your own way leading with time and experience. But what this group of leaders seem to be saying is, make a start, back yourself, and be yourself. Yes, it's risky, but embrace that risk just as you embrace those around you who will follow you along the way.